Hello to all of my YouTube friends from Tom and Dana, proprietors of this channel called If This Car Could Talk. Since today's Thursday, we're bringing you episode 37, where we'll cover the history of the 1969 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, which was our feature car in episode 36. If you missed it, look it up, because you'll certainly love this one and the amazing story it has, since it's been in the care of its current owner since 1984. When you subscribe to the channel, you'll never miss any of our fun and entertaining episodes. It's free and educational as well. So without further ado, let's explore what makes the Trans Am so legendary. The Firebird is one of the most iconic American automobiles ever produced. They were built by General Motors' Pontiac division, and availability was continuous from 1967 until 2002. Just a few years before Pontiac's demise in 2009. Since we're focusing on a first-generation car, we'll just be discussing these models. For more info on other Trans Am years, check out some of our past videos where we featured a 3rd Gen 1989 kit replica and a 4th Gen 2000 model that's mostly original. The Firebird moniker was first seen and heard during the 1950s when the name was assigned to one of GM's numerous concept cars. This car was way too wild for the car-buying public at large, but it, along with other amazing 50s concept cars, showcased just how capable the world's largest corporation was at building anything imaginable. This was the perfect name for a new series of automobiles, and Pontiac would use it during the latter half of the next decade on their new entry into the pony car market. This new market segment was single-handedly created by the immensely successful Ford Mustang, which officially took the youth market by storm on April 17th of 1964. It was clear that the General, along with most other companies, needed to respond to the Mustang, and fast. While it's true that Chrysler offered the A Body, Barracudas, and Darts 2 weeks before the Mustang was available, they were really not pony cars in the truest sense of the definition. Chrysler wouldn't have its own pony cars until the 1970 model year, but oh, what great cars they proved to be. The Firebird was available in 2 body styles, both as a 2-door hardtop and as a convertible. The first gen cars were offered through the 1969 model year, with only minor styling changes year to year. Many so subtle that most people don't notice them, but others are unmistakable. Changes were also made to conform to new government regulations, like side marker lights in 1968 and front seat headrests in 1969. Surprisingly, the car was a consolation prize for the Pontiac division, which had earlier sought to produce an exciting 2-seat sports car based on its original Banshee concept. However, upper management at GM felt this new sports car could, and most likely would, cut into Chevrolet Corvette sales. Managers at Pontiac never really forgot about this injustice, so GM's upper management decided to give Pontiac a piece of the quickly evolving pony car market through sharing the new F Body platform with its sister division Chevrolet. Unlike the Chrysler pony cars, which slowly evolved from other models, these 2 GM offerings were intended as pony cars from the start, and would immediately compete in this heavily contested market segment. Both were officially unveiled on February 23, 1967, and were immediately well received. They offered many levels of performance and styling, optional equipment, and huge color choices on both the exterior and the interior. Every customer could spec out their dream car and not spend a king's ransom. Even though both cars came from the same corporation, they competed within the marketplace against each other. This had been common, especially at General Motors, for decades. Here's what longtime Pontiac advertising executive Jim Wangers recollects on how GM's performance division took on its intra-corporate rivals. Quote, "Whatever Chevrolet did, we had to do it better. We had to make it better looking. We had to have more performance. We had to have a little more exciting interiors. Everything that Pontiac did, every one of their engineering and marketing developments, was based on besting Chevrolet, unquote. For 1967, Ford's Mercury division also had a new model called the Cougar. It was a bit more upscale and had a European flair not seen in the Mustang, and the Firebirds and Camaros had similar distinctions, and they even had division-exclusive engines. In the case of these two iconic cars, the Camaro initially had a definite edge with performance enthusiasts, with the Supersport models, where the 375-horse 396 big block engine was the top of the heap. Over at Pontiac, a performance model was also offered, and the 400 engine was no slouch and could easily be modified with factory and aftermarket goodies to stay neck and neck with any other car out on the street, pony car or not. The first generation Firebirds had a defined characteristic which would soon be labeled by enthusiasts as Coke bottle styling, which it also shared with its Camaro cousin. Other cars, like the 1968 through 70 Dodge Charger, would also be known as such. For our younger viewers, Coca-Cola was the most popular soft drink in the world at the time, and was heavily marketed by having its product associated with its trademark bottle design. Look at this photo and one of these bottles, and you'll see where this comparison to some classic auto designs comes from. An exclusive Pontiac styling trend at the time had the Firebird's front bumper integrated into the overall design of the grille, giving it a more streamlined look than the Camaro. Out back, the Firebird's 4 individual rear slit taillights were reminiscent of the 1966 and 7 Pontiac GTO. The base model Firebird came equipped with a Pontiac 230 cubic inch single overhead cam inline 6. This reliable power plant was based on the standard Chevrolet 230 inline 6. It was topped with a single barrel carburetor and rated at 165 horsepower. The surprisingly spirited Sprint Model 6 came equipped with a 4-barrel carburetor and other updated componentry, and easily developed 215 horsepower. It's really cool to see how Pontiac was committed to developing alternative power plants to the V8, which they did successfully, but it seems the American market would not be ready for a performance 6-cylinder engine for many more years into the future. Because of this preference for traditional V8 engines, 3 were available from the option list in its introductory year. A 326 cubic incher with a 2-barrel carb produced 250 horsepower. The 4-barrel HO, or high output, 326 produced 285 horsepower, and finally, the 325 horse 400 cubic inch mill from the GTO. The 400 would be seen for many more years in several versions, arguably making it one of the most loved and versatile engines from this division. All 400 engines had throttle restrictors that were installed at the factory. The main purpose was to restrict the carburetor's secondaries from fully opening. It's believed that this was done to keep the horsepower ratings of the Firebird below that of the iconic GTO. However, once this restrictor was eliminated, both cars ran equally hard. A ram air option was also available, providing functional hood scoops, higher flowing cylinder heads with stiffer springs, and a hotter camshaft. Power ratings for the ram air package was the same as the conventional 400 HO, but peaked at a higher RPM of 5,200. 1968 engine offerings were similar to the introductory year, except the 326 was bored out while retaining the same stroke to now yield 350 cubic inches. It replaced the 326. An interesting side note about Pontiac V8s is that except for the 301, all of the engines from the 1950s into the 60s and 70s essentially had the same external dimensions but different internal components and cylinder sizes. Yes, everything from a 287 to the legendary 455 shared many common components. People often refer to a 455 as a big block, but Pontiac had no such thing. All of the other GM divisions had blocks of different sizes and dimensions, so that's maybe where the confusion lies. The 1969 Firebird models arrived with little fanfare into Pontiac dealer showrooms across the nation, eclipsed by the also new Judge models. The most noticeable differences were immediately seen on the exterior of these beautifully designed pony cars. From front to rear, designers subtly refreshed them from the previous year. Most obvious was a new grille and front end design. Unlike the GTO, which offered an Endura rubberized front bumper design, the Firebird grille was chrome-plated steel. The elimination of the Pontiac shields from the front fenders by the Firebird emblems was also seen. Now, the gills were eliminated on the quarter panels, whereas in the first 2 years, there were 6 seen per side. Instead, vents were placed on the front fenders along with round parking lights. In the rear, the marker lights were incorporated into the Firebird emblems. Out back, the taillights still resembled the GTO. Inside, a revised instrument cluster was seen, and a steering column, which now housed the ignition, was also new. The front seats also employed headrests as standard safety equipment. Of course, many subtle differences exist between each year of these cleanly designed automobiles. Too many to get into here. Color availability, interior options, wheels, and everything else you can think of were probably tweaked by the designers to update the cars from one year to the next. Like the Camaro, vent windows were only used in 1967. The really big news at Pontiac dealer showrooms for 1969 was the rare appearance of the newest addition to the Poncho family called the Trans Am. Factors as to their scarcity now, or even then, are that it was late in the year, a radically redesigned Firebird was due for 1970, and a very poorly planned advertising campaign all combined to tally up a very disappointing production number, at least as far as Pontiac was concerned. There were only 697 cars. Only 8 were convertibles. They were assembled mostly in Norwood, Ohio, although a few would also be assembled in Van Nuys, California. Considering that these cars had special hoods and rear spoilers designed exclusively for this exciting new package, it probably meant that Pontiac was breaking even, or maybe even losing money, on each one sold. As mentioned, the publicity for the Trans Am was only seen in a 2-page Motor Trend ad in the June of 1969 edition. Showroom catalogs were never updated, as was the standard practice in the industry when a new model or other major changes occurred. The name was derived from the Sports Car Club of America's Trans Am Racing Series. Licensing the name to Pontiac would cost them $5 per unit, a small amount it would seem, until you consider how many TAs were to be produced in the ensuing years. It was still a wise investment for a car that would in 3 years replace the iconic GTO as Pontiac's top performance model. Ironically, they never raced in this series in the United States, but did see some track time in Canada. Because of the SCCA cubic inch limit of 305, the Canadian racers used small block Chevys. Any licensed Pontiac dealer could order this amazing new performance car, which was officially named the Trans Am Performance and Appearance Package, with an internal code of WS4. It was haphazardly launched in March of 1969. The package included the availability of both body styles, but only available in cameo white with a crystal turquoise rear panel and similarly colored painted stripes and a model name designation on each front fender, which were decals. Convertible top and interior colors were any of the standard colors available on all other Firebirds. Also, most any option could be ordered for these cars, so the few that were built were probably all unique to one another because the number of options and combinations available at the time. The base Trans Am engine was the Firebird 400 HO's 335 horse version, but with standard ram air induction. It came to be called the Ram Air 3. The same engine and the GTO was rated at 366 ponies. All 8 convertibles had this power plant. The hardtop model could be upgraded to the Ram Air 4. Ordered on only 55 cars, the stout Ram Air 4 had round port cylinder heads and a more radical camshaft and was rated at a laughable 345 horsepower, only 10 more than the milder Ram Air 3. Both of these engines were feared by the competition, especially on the street. The Ram Air 4 was, in a word, badass. Pontiac experimented with an even more lethal combination of over-the-counter parts called the Ram Air 5, but nothing was available factory installed. Enthusiasts had to buy the parts from their local Pontiac dealer and install it themselves or have it done. Needless to say, these parts are highly desirable, very rare, and extremely expensive. The base engine, believe it or not, came backed by a 3-speed manual transmission, but a 3-speed automatic as well as a 4-speed manual tranny were just a check mark away on the option list. The Ram Air 4 cars never offered anything other than a 4-speed or automatic, and the specs were different than the 3s to handle the extra power and torque. The rear axle was the tried and true 10-bolt loaded with 355 gearing, all featuring positive traction, but other ratios from mild to wild were available if you specified them. Man, what a bargain for everything you got. Although various sources differ slightly, the average cost for a base model Trans Am was $3,556 for the hardtop and $3,775 for the convertible. As mentioned earlier, a unique, fully functioning hood was standard, as was the 60-inch rear spoiler. Side scoops to vent the engine bay were functional as well as stylish, and underneath, the suspension was revised for optimal handling. A larger front sway bar, front disc brakes, and even a power steering cooler. An interesting side note to let you know about is that because of the Ram Air feature, oil filter adapters had to be re-engineered and installed to reposition the filter to a side mount design. With a stellar package like this, why didn't they sell well when new? It's believed there were expected production delays because they required unique Trans Am paint and trim. Jim Wangers, a well-known and legendary executive to Pontiac's advertising agency, believes other factors were also involved. Jim says, quote, "The cars weren't marketed at all, other than a few ads in the enthusiast publications. It was basically a kind of, hey, me too kind of a follow-up thing to the Judge. But all of this effort and all of the promotion and all of the advertising dollars that were committed went to the A-Body car." Wangers also believes that customers were counting on getting a second-gen F Body in 1970. He says, and again I quote, "In '69, we did not have a very good year with Firebird. The word had gotten out early in the year that the 70 was going to be all new. It affected Pontiac a lot more than it affected Chevrolet. They actually had a pretty good year with the Camaro in '69. Pontiac did not have a good year with the Firebird in '69. Unquote. Due to unforeseen engineering problems on the totally redesigned F-Body cars, the introduction of the all-new 1970 Firebird and Camaro was delayed, and they missed the traditional fall debut. Production of '69 F-Bodies would continue into the early months of the '70 model year, although all of the other 1970 Pontiac models had been introduced as planned on September 18, 1969. Anticipating a production delay as early as late spring of 1969, Pontiac had intentionally omitted all model year references on Firebird literature and promotional materials so that they could continue to be used for the early part of the would-be '70 model time span. So if you have what you suspect is an original TA, how do you confirm its true heritage? First, if you're a Pontiac fan, always utilize Pontiac Historical Services. This will confirm, without any doubts, any car's true heritage. If the car still has its firewall-mounted body tag, there are some things you can look for. The VIN will not tell you whether the car is a Trans Am, only that it's a Firebird with a V8. However, only the TAs used a rear spoiler, designated D80 on the tag. Also, since all cars were white, it should have a color code of 50. Since these cars also had blue highlights, the paint code will read 50-50. Today, the Trans Am is regarded as a performance icon of the muscle car era. Because a generation has passed since the last one was built, and Pontiac is no longer a viable entity, we will never again see another car exactly like the Firebird Trans Am, especially one from its introductory year. But thanks to people like Mike Bramer, who was the caretaker of our feature car from last Sunday, people in Phoenix will always be reminded of its place in automotive history. Mike drives his car as it was meant to be driven, hard, fast, and often. Thank God for people like him, so that we may all enjoy a Trans Am, even if only for a little bit. If you have, or had, a legendary muscle car, do you drive it, considering the value and rarity, or do you just show it? Or what else do you do with it? Please let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching this episode of If This Car Could Talk. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Click the subscribe button now to ensure you never miss any of our twice-weekly features. Tune in again this Sunday when we bring you a vintage 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner with the heart and soul of a 2017 Dodge Challenger Scat Pack. Is it a 69? Maybe a 2017? I know, vintage modern, or maybe modern vintage. Whatever it is, it sure is one thing. That's cool, and with a great story. You don't want to miss this incredible Mopar with the best of both worlds. It's all owner engineered and built in his home garage. See you then, and remember, stay safe out there.